What's up, movie lovers? Thanks for clicking on my channel. Released in 1995 and directed by Mel Gibson, Braveheart tells the real-life story of 11th century Scottish resistance fighter William Wallace. The movie starts off with a quote from the narrator saying how historians from England will say I'm a liar, but pretty sure historians from Scotland would call you a liar too. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's important to keep in mind that this came out in a time before Game of Thrones or movies like Outlaw King. In order to tell the real story, or at least a more accurate story, you would probably need an entire season of a series like Game of Thrones or Rome to give you the full picture. Even though this is a long movie, when you really think about it, 2.5, 3 hours is not that much time to get the audience invested in these characters and this world. And being that William Wallace was a historical figure that had already been mythologized and taken on a life of his own in the public consciousness, I can understand why Mel Gibson made the decision to tell a more simplified, if a little cliche, version of events so that he could just get people on board right away. This movie uses its time very wisely. There's not a single wasted scene, and you're either learning something new about the characters or you're having an emotional beat that you'll be able to hold on to and understand their point of view for later on in the film. Mel Gibson described this film as historical fantasy, and I think that that does a good job of describing it. So being that Braveheart is purposely setting out to tell a romanticized and fantastical version of events, does it do that well? Yeah, does a pretty good job of telling that story. Every single member of the cast seems to fully understand what their role requires, and they all give performances that are both genuine and slightly campy at the same time, so that you really feel like there's a cohesion in this world. One actor that I definitely want to make sure I mention is Patrick McGoohan as Edward Longshanks. He's the English king, he's the main antagonist of the film, and he's just such a cartoonishly over-the-top villain, but the actor knows just the right sweet spot to find where he is genuinely menacing at times and also kind of comedic at times. And his performance can kind of be a way to describe the whole movie in general. It finds the sweet spot between slightly campy and also way too brutal at times, and it somehow works. And a lot of the credit also has to go to Mel Gibson. To quote South Park, say what you want about Mel Gibson, but the guy knows story structure. Not only does he give a iconic performance in the lead role, but his direction, I think, is really why this whole movie feels as though everyone is on the same page. As a director, Mel Gibson really knows how to get you understanding where the characters are coming from with very little dialogue and not that much screen time. There will be looks that characters give each other that don't require any words, but you understand what's going on. You understand how someone feels as though they're living in the shadow of their father just based on how it's filmed. He really does get a lot across with the visual storytelling. When there's someone who's really, really good at doing it, it definitely takes some movie that could have been B tier or C tier and pumps it up a few notches. The battle scenes are also exceptionally well done. They're gory and brutal, but they also feel incredibly cathartic. There's also a real sense of escalation from one battle to the next, and you really understand the stakes of each. There's also enough going on in each of them that they feel unique enough that you don't get bored by watching them. I'd be kicking myself in the face if I did not mention James Horner does the music for this film, and probably my favorite soundtrack he ever did. He was an unbelievably, amazingly talented composer. As much praise as I'm heaping on Braveheart, the film definitely has its flaws, especially in the third act with some of the things that happen. I always hate it when there's a film that has a really forced romance, and you can definitely poke some holes in the last half of this film where you're like, wow, yeah, I really don't believe that you two are getting involved with each other. This feels really forced and kind of stupid. It's also a movie that is probably a victim of its own success, where if you haven't seen this movie, it's such a landmark in popular culture, and there's so many quotes you've probably heard from it that I feel as though that if you go and watch it, you can only be let down. It's like Titanic or Lord of the Rings or The Godfather, where for some people it might just get ruined for the fact that it is such a big movie. Even still, for all of its flaws, for all of its cheesy moments, I have to say that Braveheart, for me, is an A-tier movie. So those are my opinions on Braveheart, but enough about me. What do you think of Braveheart, and what's your favorite movie that Mel Gibson has ever directed? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, there's probably a video popping up around here that you might also like, and please feel free to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, all that YouTube stuff. I know it's a cliche to ask, but it really does help the channel grow, so thanks for that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you at the next video.